Welcome to the Thea Lee podcast. It is January 6th, 2026, and we are continuing on our reading of the Bible. Before we begin today, I want to let you know that we are going to cover a couple adult topics in today's readings. So if you have little ears or children around, you may want to wait till later to listen to this one, or you might have some really interesting questions come at you. So we start out today. Abraham is outside of his tent, and it's the hot part of the day, and he sees three men walking up, and he runs and meets them, and he invites them to come sit in the shade and says that he will make some food for them. So they agree and come sit. He asks Sarah to make some bread, and he goes and finds a fattened calf and has his servant fix that for them. And he serves them milk and yogurt and the food. And while they're sitting there eating, they asked, so where is Sarah, your wife? And Abraham says, oh, she's in the tent. And they say, one of them says, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Now, Sarah was inside the tent, and of course she overhears this conversation, and she laughs quietly to herself, and she starts thinking things like, how is this even possible? I'm an old lady, and my husband is an old man, and I'm past the age of bearing children. And then the Lord says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And why did she say, can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. And Sarah was afraid then, and so she denied it and said, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. So here's my question, is what do we think is possible for God to do? Do we think that some things are just impossible and he cannot do them? I was hard on Sarah before when I kind of compared her to Eve when she tried to make God's prophecy happen in their home and make it possible for Abraham to have a son. But I've got to say, just as a person, I kind of understand because, I mean, she's 90 at this point and Abraham is 99. It does seem impossible. But here we go, like nothing is impossible for God. And if he says something, he cannot lie. So then these men get done with their meal and they start walking away towards Sodom, and Abraham walks with them. And God has this conversation where he asks, should I hide my plan from Abraham? And then he kind of talks himself out of it because he explains, like, Abraham is going to become this great nation and many nations of the earth are going to be blessed through him, and that he had chosen him on purpose, right? And he knows that Abraham is going to direct his sons and families to keep God's ways and be right and just. And he knows that he's going to do all of the things for Abraham that he had promised. So he talks himself into sharing his plan with Abraham, essentially. So he says that he has heard this great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant and so wicked. So he was there to go see if this was true. And so the other two men, they start walking towards Sodom, but God remains with Abraham. And Abraham goes and starts interceding with God and asks him, like, if there are righteous people in the city, are you going to just wipe them away with the wicked? You surely wouldn't do that, right? That wouldn't be a just thing to do. What if there are 50 righteous people in the town? Will you spare the entire city for the sake of those 50 righteous people? And so God says, yes, I will not destroy it if I can find 50 righteous people. And then Abraham goes again and says, let me speak further, and says, look, he knows that he's really nothing, but what if there's 45 righteous people? Will you destroy the whole city just because there's 5 less? And so God says, no, I will not destroy it if there are 45 righteous people in the city. And then he does it again. Suppose there's only 40. And God says, I will not destroy it for the sake of 40. And then Abraham says, please don't be angry. Let me speak. But what if there's only 30 righteous people? And God says, I will not destroy it if there are 30. And then Abraham keeps going. I've dared to go this far, so let me continue. What about 20? And God says, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. And then finally he says, Lord, please don't be angry with me. One more time. What if there's only 10 found there? And God says, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. And then the Lord and Abraham's conversation is finished, and God goes on his way, and Abraham returns to his tent. So now we are at a hard part of this story. That evening, the two angels go to the entrance of Sodom, and Lot is sitting there. And Lot sees them come in, and Lot invites them to come to his home and eat and be his guests there. And the angels say, no, we're fine. We'll just stay in the city square. But Lot insists that they go home with him. And so they do. They go home with him. I think Lot knows that they are not safe. So they go into the home, and Lot brings them food. That night, all of the men in Sodom surround his house, both young and old, and they shout to Lot, "Where are the two men that went with you tonight? Bring them to us so we can have sex with them." So Lot goes outside and shuts the door and says, "Please, brothers, don't do such a wicked thing. I have two virgin daughters, and I will bring them out, and you can do whatever you want with them, but please leave this men alone, because they are my guests, and they are under my protection." And they yelled at him and told him to stand back. They were saying that he was acting like their judge, and they were going to treat them worse than the other men. And they lunged at Lot to break down the door, but the angels actually reached out, pulled Lot into the house, and bolted the door. And then the angels blinded all of those men, young and old, who were at the door, so they finally gave up trying and went away. Then the angels questioned Lot, "Do you have more relatives in the city? You need to get them out of this place, your sons-in-laws, your sons, daughters, or anyone else, because they are about to destroy the city completely, because the outcry from this place is so great that it has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot rushes out and goes to his son-in-law's place and his sons, and he tells them, "We've got to get out of the city. God's going to destroy it." But all of these young men thought that he was joking. So at dawn the next morning, the angels became very insistent, and they told Lot and his wife and his daughters, "You get out of here right now, or you're going to be swept away in this destruction." And Lot still hesitated, and the angels actually just grabbed all of them and dragged them out of the city. And once they were out of the city, the angels ordered them to run for their lives. Do not look back, do not stop anywhere in the valley, and go to the mountain. Lot still is scared, and he begs them, "Please don't make me go to the mountains," because he thinks he will die. So he wants to go to this little village that is nearby. And the angels finally say, "Fine, go to that village. We won't destroy that village, but you have to go now because we can't start until you get there." So Lot takes his daughters and his wife, and they all run to the village. Right at dawn, when they reach the village, his wife turns around and looks, and she turns into a pillar of salt. Sulfur starts raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're completely destroyed. In the morning, when Abraham gets up, he goes out where he and the Lord were standing the day before and looks, and all he sees is pillars of smoke rising like from a furnace. But God had listened to Abraham's request, and he kept Lot safe and got him out of the disaster. So now we enter into another hard part of this story. Lot and his daughters then leave that little town. That little town was called Zor. But Lot was now afraid of the people there, so he did take his daughters and go live in a cave in the mountains. And so while they're up in this cave in the mountains, his daughters start talking because there's no one else around, and they are saying, "Look, we're not going to be able to get married. There's no other men here, and our father's getting old, and he's going to be past the age of having children soon. So why don't we get him drunk and lay with him so that we can have children and continue our family line?" So they do this. Each of these daughters spend 2 nights getting their father really drunk, and they have sex with him, and then they both get pregnant with him. It does say that Lot was so drunk that he wasn't aware of what was happening. They both ended up having sons with him. The older daughter had a son named Moab, and so he became the ancestor of the Moabites. And the younger daughter gave birth to a son named Ben-Ami, and he was the ancestor of the Ammonites. So now we go back to the story of Abraham, and he leaves there and goes south to the Negev for a while between Kadesh and Shur, and then he moves to Gerar. And he's living in Gerar as a foreigner with his wife Sarah. And he again starts saying that she is his sister. And of course, the king there sees Sarah and brings her into his palace. But that night that he brought her into the palace, God goes to Amalek in his dream and tells him that you're a dead man because that woman belongs to another man. She is married. He says that he had not slept with her yet, And he was saying to the Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Abraham told me that it was his sister, and she herself said that he was her brother, and I acted in complete innocence. My hands are clean. So God says, yes, I know you're innocent, and that's why I kept you from sinning. Get her back to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. Then you will live. But if you don't return her to him, you will be sure that you and all your people will die. So the next morning, the king gets up and calls everybody together and told them what had happened. So everyone is just terrified. They get a hold of Abraham and they ask, what have you done? Why have you done this to people? Whatever possessed you to do such a thing? And Abraham says that he thought that this was a godless place and he didn't want them to kill him to take his wife. And he says, she really is my sister. We both have the same father, but different mothers. Then Amalek, the king, ends up giving him a lot of animals and male and female servants. He brings Sarah back to him. He said, look over my land. You can live anywhere you want. He tells Sarah, look, I'm giving your brother 1,000 pieces of silver in the presence of everyone so that no one can say I've done you wrong. And this settles our claim. So Abraham prayed to God. God healed Amalek and his wife and his female servants so that they could have children, for the Lord had caused all of the women to be infertile because of what had happened to Abraham's wife Sarah. Then it goes on to talk about how the Lord kept his word, that he did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, and 8 days after he was born, he was circumcised. Abraham was 100 years old at that time. And Sarah declared that God has brought me laughter, and all who hear about this will laugh with me, because who would have said to Abraham that Sarah could nurse a baby, and yet she had given Abraham a son in his old age? So, complicated reading today, everyone. My takeaway is that God can do anything. There is nothing impossible for him. So if he says an old woman can have a baby, he can make it happen. And then it shows that he is a righteous and just God. And so when there is wicked and evil, to the point that it obviously was in Sodom and Gomorrah, given the story, how it shows us how evil that city was. In a way, it really was a just thing to destroy it. How could something like that have continued and been okay? And even after Abraham again lies about her being his sister, God still intervenes and protects them. A lot to think about today. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk again tomorrow.